Hey guys, this is Chris Mincola with the Mincola Group over at West USA Realty. Got my puppy in the background here, getting stuff off to a little bit later start than I like to do during the week. But my birthday this week, we had holiday this week, so I do my best, and we've been really busy, which is good anecdotally for our for us and our business and what's going on at the street level in the Phoenix area for housing. But anyway. I'm going to kind of run through a few things here on the economy, housing, and what's going on with some of the crazy stuff, and then get into some more of the local data. But um, you've heard me talk about this before, where basically we've had inflation. It wasn't transitory. We had the Federal Reserve buying Treasury and mortgage-backed securities. When they were fixing the rates basically, which kept the rates low for so long, and even into the inflationary period that we've had over the last 3 to 4 years, with all the extra spending that's going on, and the things that were causing the inflation. We talked about too many dollars chasing too few goods. So um, that that caused a lot of issues. It wasn't transitory. Talked about that many times. Okay, so uh, I think we're going to see rates drop around May 1st, even with all the crazy talk going on right now. And at the Fed's meeting, the end of April, beginning of May, we should see by the first 2 to 3 for the rest of the year. We should see about 2 to 3, maybe 4 rate cuts this year at this point. And the biggest question is, what are they going to do with it, basically with their treasury runoffs? Okay, that's going to be the biggest thing, because they've got like $8.6 trillion of holdings on their sheet. So, um, you know, how slow or how fast they offload that's something to really watch for the Fed's holdings. Okay, that's going to be something big on where we're going to be on rates. And again, it doesn't directly correlate with mortgage rates, but it does indirectly affect mortgage rates. And we've talked about that many times in the past. But people ask all the time about, things like, housing, is it a good time to buy right now and all that? If you have just to give you an example, and for the Phoenix area, these numbers would make sense. But if you had like a $500,000 house that you wanted to buy, you're going to see about a 5% return. So that's going to be, if you put $10,000, or I'm sorry, 10% down on that house, you're going to see, about a 5% return this year, let's say, to use a conservative number. I think it's going to be higher than that. In the Phoenix area, that's more countrywide. I think in 5%, I think in the Phoenix area, we're probably going to see, from January to January of last year, we saw over 9% increase across the board. Obviously, every neighborhood community is going to be a little different in Phoenix area, but the greater Phoenix area saw over 9%. So I think we're going to definitely see 9 or 10% gains again this year. But on this example, that 5% return be about $25,000. That's a 50% return on your 10% down investment. So without a doubt, it's, going to be a good time to, definitely still always a good time to buy. And I'll get into kind of the history of that here in a second, just a little bit. But that's without even getting into, the amortization, the compound interest, the tax incentives, and all that stuff. But a homeowner is going to, have a greater net worth of, than a renter, about 40% greater. Okay. And about 2/3 of that is going to be tied up in their real estate. So, when people ask me that all the time, and say, I don't see where it doesn't make sense. Okay. And, it's mathematically impossible right now in most places across the country, in the Phoenix area for sure. It's mathematically impossible with the inventory we have and the demand we have to have a housing crash. Okay. So and I'll get to more of that in a second, but let me just talk about rents for a second, because this is also an inflationary factor, because about 44% of our inflation is caught up in shelter costs. Well, we've seen the rate of shelter cost increases drop dramatically over the year. The rate of increases dropped. So that's good news, because that means inflation has definitely dropped. And we're seeing the rate of increase slow there. But that's mostly going to be on new rents. Okay, so on a new place you're going to go rent, you'll see that. Again, real estate's local. It's going to be a little different every other place, but if a landlord has somebody there and they want to renew their lease, you're probably going to see about a 5 to 6% increase. Okay, pretty typical, about a 5 to 6% increase annually. And landlords know, it's a pain in the butt to have to move and all that. There's extra costs and everything. So unless you're going to be going to buy a house, you're going to have that increase every year. So by buying a home, you also lock in that payment. Okay. And you can always refinance to a lower payment later. Plus, you want to be in your home with your payment, or your principal, what you paid for that home, the cost of that home. You want to have that locked in before rates drop. So if rates are going to start dropping around the middle of this year, okay, and you bought a house, let's say, in the next month or two, that means that you're going to go about 2 months without a mortgage payment. Okay, so if you close on a house in March, okay, you're not going to have your first payment till May 1st. Okay. And like I said, down the road, you can always refinance. Okay. And you can usually, do that without any out of pocket costs. Okay. So talk to a loan officer, got mortgage broker. I would refer to you all day long to get the best rates, best pricing and all that, and more options. But that's another story. There's another thing going on right now called shrinkflation. You've heard about that. This is great if there's a little different or less packaging. Sometimes we're wondering, are we getting less portions, smaller burgers, all that kind of thing? But some of that can be good because then people aren't losing their jobs or they're not having to raise the prices in some cases. Okay. But that is a real thing. That's certainly something that's going on. As far as inflation goes, using round numbers, we're seeing that running around 3%. But that's including the 20% increase that we saw previously that's already baked in. We're not, that's not receding, in other words. So, just over the last 3 years with all the extra printing that's gone on with the money, the overspending on a lot of nonsense, the Fed waiting too long, that's caused all that. Okay. So, those are just all things that you want to talk about. And then of course, we know it wasn't transitory. Now, according to the government, this is something that came out recently. According to the government, we created in this country 353,000 jobs from the last jobs report. However, the real number, get this, the real number is closer to 2 million jobs lost. Yes, you heard it right, 2 million jobs lost. There's actually 2,635,000 jobs lost using round numbers, that were magically taken away with the magic keystroke and a thing called seasonal adjustments, which is the BLS model, which is horrible. They're understaffed. It's a Herculean effort. Some people say there may be some biases, whatever, but the fact still remains we should have seen those seasonal adjustments stripped away. And in reality, a downward revision, and we should still see all that catch up, and we will see that, and that'll come out. And we get those real numbers eventually. And that's from what we call what's called the household survey, which is much more accurate. And in these numbers, it also showed that 800,000 people completely left the workforce. So what does that mean? They left the workforce. Well, they lost their job. They were laid off. They lost their job, and they didn't look for a job in the last 4 weeks. Now, you can argue with that, contest that. Maybe that's correct or not, but that's a giant chunk in those numbers that we're talking about. Okay, guys. So that is a thing. That is a thing for sure. All right. So in the seasonal adjustment, we should see unemployment numbers, we should see over 4%, but by washing away, over 4% is a big thing. We'll talk about that in a second. But by washing those away, we kept unemployment at 3.7%, which looks much better. And as far as the Federal Reserve is concerned, it's no alarm, because they're trying to do demand destruction. They're trying to do, raise the Fed's fund rate so it costs more to borrow money, so people spend less, which in turn also means that companies can't do as much. They can't make as much acquisitions on things on credit. They can't do as many maybe projects. They can't hire as many people, because that money, it costs so much money to borrow that money now. Okay. And people can't go out and maybe buy what they want because the credit's just too high. Okay. It's just costs too much to borrow money. So 3.7 versus over 4. All right. And the full-time, we've lost over the last 3 months, we've lost 1.7 million full-time workers and replaced them with part-time workers. This also shows a reality of a weakening labor force. Okay. In that, and just those numbers. Okay. So those are two different things that we're talking about there, and a replacement of full-time and with part-time. All right. And you can Google this. It's been all over the news. All the companies that are laying off, not only in the tech sector, but companies like Nike, DocuSign. I mean, there's been tons of companies, even media companies and stuff, all kinds of stuff going on. Okay. So even though we think, oh, well, GDP's up, we're going to talk about that more in a minute. Okay. So you can look up that list on your own, but we also see another layer of this in the jobs numbers that's still not really kind of out there, is that we have hours worked. We've lost a half an hour for hours worked in the last year. And that might not seem like a lot, but in addition to what we've already talked to, if you break it down, that equates to 2.4 million job losses over the last year. Okay, in throughout the labor force. Okay, if you kind of take the whole thing into consideration and compute that out. Okay, and these are the data points that sometimes are missed, but because we like to listen to people like Barry Habib and some other people over at Housing Wire, like Logan. It's just amazing that these things don't always get talked about, or they are, but they're not maybe quite mainstream yet. You're going to see them start coming out. Okay. Before we see a big pivot from the Fed. So this will all come out, but when you see that come out and get caught up with the mainstream media, we're going to see that 4.1 mark in unemployment is going to be a big number, because 12 of the 19 feds think that unemployment will stay under 4.1%. And that isn't the reality even now. Okay. So now in housing, we've had 75 up years. We had one kind of even year, and we had 5 years that were kind of that crash that always talks about, and everybody wants to go back and talk about the crash. But there were some things that were very, very different that I want to kind of remind everybody about, because everybody, I've been hearing about the next crash since the last crash. Okay. But during that time, it really started hitting around 2006, when the trouble really started. And those were because the first time home buyers at that point, in 2006, we're about 33. The median age was about 33 years old. Okay. Born in 1973. Well, why is that important? I never thought you'd ask. Well, 33 years earlier in 1973 is when abortion was legalized. So you had a huge drop in births. And on top of that, at the same time, builders were putting up more homes than any time in history. Over 2 million homes a year is what they were building. Okay. And we had like 4 million homes, almost 4 million homes, that were out there actively. So, uh, you know, you had kind of these two things happening at the same time. Then around 1990, 1991, we saw, a big boost in those household in more births. Okay. So that's now catching up during this period of time, which all these, households are being formed today, over 2 million households. And, you know, the difference in births and everything that have now increased during the 90, 91 period and forward. So they're building about 1.4 million homes. So the way to play this is, excuse me, I was going to sneeze. So the way to play this is, sorry, right now is, to kind of be able to see all these converging data points that a lot of people don't look at, a lot of people aren't talking about. Mainstream media maybe being a little lazy, maybe using some AI, not really looking at the real picture. So the way to play this is, if you know this, is get ahead of it. Okay. There is more demand than there are homes right now. Okay. There's more pent up demand. There's more household formation. There's more people that want to buy. And we know that for every 1% drop, that means we've got about 5 million more people that can qualify to buy a home. So we got huge pent up demand, and we've got these factors coming right around the corner. As far as the overall economy, it's not as strong as we're being told. Number one, right now in the Phoenix area, we have a very strong economy, which is great. Maybe we won't be impacted quite as much, but they're saying consumers are resilient, but a lot of consumers are kicking the can down the road. What do I mean? They have enormous interest on these buy now, pay later programs. Okay. Interest in general because of the Fed's fund rate and everything, and the inflation, and which is another tax of itself. But we also see an increase in these buy now, pay later programs. Okay. And let's put it this way, there's 88 million people who have done or are doing these buy now, pay later programs. So people use these buy now, pay later programs with these super high interest rates. On top of that, the price of everything's gone up, So, you see that these are a lot of times 4 or 5 times, greater than a regular interest rate on a credit card, which are high enough. And we're seeing, results is we're going to see this all catch up, and we're going to see a slowdown in the economy. Okay. So people on the news will say GDP is strong, stock market's doing great, right? That's going great. But you need to look at GDI, gross domestic income. Okay. Gross domestic income. The two have diverged more than we've seen in decades. And then then we're going to see this gravitating towards GDI, gross domestic income. Okay, we're going to see it gravitating to gross domestic income. We see that all the time with these sort of situations throughout, economic history. So we're totally off track with gross domestic income. All right, I think according to Barry Habib and the rest of the people I like to follow, we're probably going to see a recession most likely by the middle of this year. All right. When all this stuff starts catching up and getting out there. But the other thing is you're not really going to hear about it. What do you mean you're not going to hear about it, Chris? When we have a recession, you don't hear about it for months after it actually happened. That sounds insane, Chris. What are you talking about? Yeah, the government doesn't tell us so we'll probably be in a real recession around the middle of this year. but we won't hear about it till winter, or probably won't hear about it till spring of 2025. Because it's just how it works with those announcements. You don't actually know about the recession until it's actually happened. Sounds ridiculous, but that's just the way it goes. Um, so anyway, these programs are about 4 to 5 times higher, and a lot of, the biggest thing is right now, the reason why we were bringing this up is we got 88 million people in these programs. 35% of them are already behind and not paying on those. Yeah. Okay. That's a big problem. And then on top of that, the inflation, the credit card debt that people have right now, and the real numbers in the jobs numbers, which the Fed looks at, the Fed's been talking about, and that's when they really want to make their pivot eventually in these rates, which will indirectly affect mortgage rates. Okay. So, I'm going to also kind of quote Barry Habib here when he says, the stock market, looks great and everything right now, but when it comes to a halt, and when he says, old enough to remember the dot-com boom, the year 2000, and we're looking at 2006, and we're seeing a lot of replays here. We're seeing a lot of repeats, a lot of things that led up to those recessions, leading up to these recessions. Now, again, not seeing a housing bubble, but in the overall economy, when it comes to the real jobs report, what we could see with a crash in the stock market, with GDP versus GDI, with these buy now, pay later, all this adding up. And then we have, we had .com, now we have AI. Okay. We're just old enough to remember, a lot of these things are repeats. And another indicator, another thing that's kind of similar, right before Cisco went bust, okay, never really recovered. And then we got NVIDIA, okay, NVIDIA, it's totally hyperbolic, just like we saw with Cisco. So there's cracks in the jobs numbers, the GDI and the stocks, buy now, pay later, inflation, many parallels, and all of this will affect mortgage rates in the end. Then, indirectly, but directly, and then we see these population growths that we talked about. Okay, before when you had the crash, you had the biggest building spree, most new homes on the market, properties ready to go. Then you had this, decrease in the first time home buyers, where now you have the reverse of that. Okay. So if you lock in that price and that payment now, refinance later when they go down, you're going to be ahead of all this mess coming. Okay. So is it a good time to buy? Yes. I would say if you can afford to, buy now. Buy now. Okay. And get into the equity game. All right. So again, we had 75 good years, 5 bad years. We told you why that happened. Way too much inventory, not enough population. Okay. We had poor credit practices to try and get rid of that inventory. We don't have any of that now. No, it's totally flipped in reverse as far as home loans, home loan qualification, pre-approvals, and all that. Okay. As far as the population, more now. As far as the inventory, okay, across the country and in Phoenix. Okay. So, guys, I hope that kind of sets a lot of the nonsense that you're hearing out there aside. Okay. You can look this stuff up if you want. You don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to go along with Barry Habib or anything like that. But it's just mathematically impossible to have an issue or a crash when you just have too low inventory. Okay. Now, I'm going to share my screen here with you really quick, and we're going to finish this up because my puppy is wanting to. Okay, hang on. All right. All right. So, guys, mortgage rates recovered this week. They went down a little bit. We see the 10-year treasury. It actually ended up down, which is great. Okay. And then we see that mortgage rates drop back down. Now they're higher than they were a few weeks ago. Again, we're going to see those drop as we go. Listings under contract here in the Phoenix area, they are up over 8,000, about 8,200. Okay. And that is definitely down from the last couple of years. But I think once these rates drop, it's like we're going to have a busy season in the spring. And then the second half of the year, when the rates drop, we're going to have a whole nother busy season into next year. It's going to be crazy. Okay. Is it going to be like it was before? I don't think it's going to be quite that bad. But then again, we do have some pent up demand like we did back during COVID, in the sense that a lot of people have been waiting. They got priced out of the market, or they're just waiting. So sorry about all the dog noise in the back, but I've got to finish this up. Okay. The Crawford report tells us right now it's just kind of hanging in this 117 range. Demand is up a little bit. Supply is just kind of where it's been. Nothing really different there. And we see, as far as, this is concerned, under 90 is a buyer's market, over 110 is a seller's market. And right now, topping the list in the seller's market at 199.9 is Chandler, as far as the city's proper. Then Gilbert, Glendale, Fountain Hills, Phoenix, Mesa, Tempe, Avondale, Scottsdale, Peoria. Those are all over 110. We've got Cave Creek, which Cave Creek and Paradise Valley and Surprise are right in the middle range, okay, between 90 and 110. And then Goodyear, Queen Creek, Buckeye, and Maricopa City, those are all buyers markets. One other thing here really fast on the mortgage rates, guys, keep in mind these are the average retail rates. If you were to talk to a mortgage broker, we can refer you to one. You're definitely going to see better rates than that. So, guys, I hope that helps with some of the crazy stuff going on right now in the bond market with these rates and with all the crazy stuff going on in the economy. If you guys have any questions at all, want more information about your local area, your property values, how to get started with buying a home, selling, buying some investment properties, let me know. I'd love to be able to talk to you about getting started with any of that stuff. We'll talk to you guys soon. See you next time.